Autobiographical element in Paradise Lost. In literature, a creative writer may become personal or impersonal depending on which approach he chooses to pursue for the expression of his ideas about life. If he is objective and personal, the critics and readers may be able to construct the profile of his life and his views on life without much difficulty. This approach, although very appealing in one sense, may look universality about it. The latter approach, on the other hand, based on the notions of detachment, is not circumscribed by personal expressions but has universal appreciation across all temporal boundaries. The epic form of writing as conceived by Homer and Virgil was essentially an objective expression of subjects of unusually proportions by human standards. But Milton deviated from this classical tradition and infused his own soul and personality into it. According to Coleridge, John Milton is in every line of the Paradise Lost. And in Ligout's view, Milton is in truth the only living being who exists in his works. Thus the elements of self-revelation, both personal and philosophical, are explicitly manifested throughout the whole structure of the epic. After reading the poem, one justifiably tends to think that Paradise Lost is basically a personal and spiritual autobiography of the poet. Para number 2. Milton's age is the meeting ground of diverse forces fighting for supremacy over each other. The first great influence that Milton seems to have come under was the spirit of Renaissance. The revival of Hellenism in Europe brought along with it a renewal interest in mundane life, a new spirit of inquiry, a sense of defying autocratic authors, a fresh appreciation of beauty and enjoyment, the induction of a logical and rationalistic outlook on stereotypes and institutionalized behavior, and more important of all, an increased interest in Hellenic art and literature. Milton's Paradise Lost quite clearly demonstrates their ideas directly or indirectly in the whole conception of the poem. He used the art and learning of the Renaissance to project his religious and moral ideas about life. The treatment of the epic is thoroughly classical. The character of Satan is conceived and glorified in the light of the Renaissance ideals. The glorification of Satan at the expense of God is essentially in the Renaissance spirit of defiance of authority. Satan, like the heroes of Spenser, represents Milton's love of enterprise and adventure. Milton's belief in humanism gets reflected in Satan's love of liberty and freedom from unexplained constraints imposed on individuals. Thus, the first thing that strikes the reader about the revelation of his personal ideas is his rationalistic and humoristic outlook on life. Though he had religious beliefs of his own, he scrutinized every dogma under the searchlight of reason in the first phase of his poetical career. Paragraph number 3. If Milton was clearly more under the influence of Renaissance ideas in his youth, in his older age he came predominantly under the impact of Puritanism. Although Puritanism and Reformation are the result of Renaissance, the former movements developed eventually into something hostile to the influence of Renaissance. The Puritans believed in an austere, high-principled, God-fearing, blemishless kind of life. The Puritans were against all established authority, whether the government or the church. Throughout the poem, we can find unmistakably the imprints of Milton's puritanical ideas, which he seems to have developed in his old age. Although Milton was free from moral and religious earnestness, he was free from intensely narrow outlook peculiar of a strict Puritan. The very theme of the Paradise Lost is religious. Milton takes upon himself to justify the ways of God to man. He based his great work on the story of the fall of man as given in the Bible. Here Milton's object was to show how man fell through disobedience and how he could regain the lost paradise through the grace of God. The conflict in the epic is basically the spiritual conflict of man's first disobedience. Although the epic superstructure is classical, the filling up of the form is mainly derived from the scriptures. The action of the epic also to a great extent confirms the theological details underlying it. Milton makes hell a much hateful place, and his intention undoubtedly is to warn all followers of the satanic powers against the consequences of evildoing. As a Puritan, Milton was opposed to paganism, pagan beliefs, and pagan deities. He therefore identifies the fellow angels with the heathen gods. His criticism of the life people led at his time was essentially inspired by his puritanical ideas. Milton lashes openly at the corruption prevailing in both religious and temporal spheres of life, which he despised personally. Milton's religious affinity also finds expression in his vocation to the heavenly muse. It is, however, in Paradise Regained that Milton presents himself as a firm believer in Puritanism. Paragraph number 4. It is also apparent from various lines in Paradise Lost that Milton did not have a high opinion of woman and considered her as a trouble for man. Milton seems to hold Eve responsible for Adam's fall. Milton's experience of his private life and his relationship with woman is exposed through the relationship that existed between Adam and Eve. Adam's mourning on the unhappiness of marriage is a reflection of Milton's own disappointment in his marriage. The reconciliation between Adam and Eve refers to the actual happenings in Milton's life. More importantly, Milton's premise of the nobility and moral beauty of Eve's character suggests the picture of actual womanhood typified in his third wife. Paragraph number 5. Milton's political ideas and aspirations can also be traced through the poem. He seems to achieve this objective mainly through the speeches and actions of Satan. Milton, who was disillusioned by the restoration of monarchy in England, identified himself unwillingly with Satan. Milton perceives God as the kings of England surrounded by flatterers. His political ideas are also expressed in the last book about the failure of Commonwealth. The debate in hell is an echo of the period of passionate parliamentary life in England during that time. Paragraph number 6. In addition to Milton's ideas and aspirations about life in general, there are allusions in the poem which relate to physical facts of his life. Milton has lost his eyesight when he was engaged in writing the great epic and had fallen on evil days. The lines portraying his plight are full of pathos. These passages unmistakably recall the happenings in the poet's personal life. For Milton, the England of the Restoration was hell. Satan had been thrown down into hell from heaven, and so was Milton hurled into the hell of restoration after the good time that he had spent during the protectorate of Cromwell. The Restoration was the greatest shock that Milton had received in his life, yet like Satan, Milton was optimistic and felt that Puritanian could succeed, though for some time it was clouded by the fire of hell. Thus, Milton's spirit of optimism is expressed also through the character of Satan. Paragraph number 7. It is worth pointing out in summation that Milton's personal feelings and ideas had an indelible mark on his style. The revelation of his personality gave lyric intensity to the poem. In the light of these illustrations, it is clear that Milton seems to have forgotten the original aim of the epic and tends to project more of himself than anything else. It rather tends to justify the ways of Milton to men of his age. Thank you.